your impact within your nonprofit organizations. A brief overview of what we talked about last week. Last week, we talked about this one thing idea, going from really talking from one program to one team to one organization. And I love that idea because it just focuses on, we're going to hone in on one program. We're going to focus on evaluating that one program. We figured out how to start and where to start. And then as we progress in evaluating that one program and we know what works and what doesn't, we know our baseline, we have our foundation, then and only then you're able to move forward to evaluate all the programs within that one team. And then at some point be able to evaluate all the teams and all the programs within your entirety of your organization. So that's what we talked about last week. This week, we're going to talk about program effectiveness. So the title of this is Program Effectiveness. And I'm going to start out with this analogy. I was told as a young age that, and you may be religious, you may not, but I was told as a young age that your faith can move mountains. And if you're not religious, I think the other way to say that is you can move mountains. That's what I was told. And I was always baffled by that idea. Like, how could I actually logically move mountains? It made no logical sense to me whatsoever. Like, me, a mere human being able to move this mountain that I look at that is standing over 1,000 feet tall, it makes no sense. But then someone actually helped me through it and explained to me in this way. Well, what if you realize that that mountain was made up of rocks, and so you moved a rock every day? As you move that rock every day, one rock of that mountain every day, what would end up happening over time? And after they told me that, I was like, no one's ever explained it to me that way. That is actually the most logical way that I can see that happening, where you're moving a rock every single day to the point where you've done it so much that you're actually seeing that mountain move. When it comes to evaluations, all we want to really see, all funders care about, all our nonprofits care about, all the people that we're serving care about, is this mountain that's being moved. And that mountain can be in different aspects. It can be the opioid use rate, or overdose rate, or homelessness rate, or matriculation to college rate, or graduation from high school rate, or graduation from college rate, or employment rate, or housing rate, meaning getting access to housing, or obtaining resource rate. All these things that we think about, food scarcity rate. I can keep going. The literal list is endless. All these things, literacy rate, there's another one, morbidity rate. All these things are really centered around, these are large problems. These are mountains that we all want to see moved. These are so obvious, in fact, that it's like, how in the world can we move this mountain? Well, the cool thing is that that mountain wasn't always there. And so as you move one rock at a time, maybe it was half a mountain. As you keep moving one rock at a time and you achieve half a mountain. And maybe half a mountain is life skill development, or development of positive mental health, or looking at someone using the resources within substance abuse, or using resources of mental health, or using the resources to get an education. Maybe it's taking a general or a GED examination or GED course, or something like that. Well, those are different things that really accomplish that half a mountain. But what about these one a day rocks that we do every day? We're removing this one rock at a time. What are those? Well, those rocks are what I call program effectiveness. Those are the things that you do every single day and are able to measure every day and accomplish every day over time, so much so that you end up seeing that half a mountain. So much so that you end up over time being able to see that mountain move. And so what that does is it helps you as an organization figure out what you can focus on now to be able to achieve what you want to achieve in the long run. And what that also does, it helps donors to be able to see your growth over time, your progression over time, so that they don't just look at this long run or long-term gain. They don't just look at this mountain being moved. They look at these one-day things that you guys are doing, so much so that they can see the projection of where it's heading. They can see that it's going to lead to this half a mountain being moved, and they can see that it's leading to this full mountain being moved. And that's why I start with program effectiveness, because program effectiveness starts with this moving this one rock every single day. And the way that I like to look at program effectiveness is by simply looking at three different things, really. These are my top three things. I look at attendance rate, I look at satisfaction rate, and I look at understanding rate. So attendance rate, satisfaction rate, and understanding rate. What do I mean by those? Attendance, how many people are coming out to your events, coming out to your programs, coming out to your activities, coming out to your workshops? How many people are attending? How many new people are coming? How many recurring people are coming? What type of people are coming? Are they just males or are they just females? Are they of a certain age group? Are they of a certain diverse background? Well, you want to look at all those things because that's a part of your attendance rate. And starting out with this, I never knew that attendance rate could have so much depth to it, to be completely honest with you guys. I thought attendance rate was just simply looking at how many people are coming out. No, it actually has so much depth to it because you can take that and go with the age group, the males and females of gender or sex. You can look at all the diverse backgrounds. You can look at ethnicities, all those things you can look at when it comes to attendance rate. The second thing that I was talking about, satisfaction rate. How satisfied are your participants with the program or with the event that they're coming to? And the only way you're going to know that is if you ask. But also, it's not looking at just from the participant's perspective, but maybe asking your staff members, how satisfied are you with the program? So you can be able to figure out the satisfaction rate from both perspectives. And if you're inviting funders out to that event, you would ask them, how satisfied were you of this program from a scale of 1 to 10? To get a good perspective of where they see the program or where they see your event. And we'll get to the event in a second. The third thing is understanding. So one of the things that I did recently with one of the programs called a recovery house program is they had a lot of events that were happening within their program. So the program was called Recovery House, and they had a lot of activities and events. And so their activity and events were like a financial literacy course or a communal bonding time or physical activity time or a Minds of Men class, stuff like that. They had different activities that they had throughout the actual program. And one of the things I asked them, actually Turo and myself, we were able to ask them was, so what are they supposed to get out of this? Like, what is the point of this time? What is the point of this activity? Why are you having this? What is this participant supposed to understand from being here? And it was funny, after we asked that, they looked at me a little bit shocked because they were like, I never actually thought about that. Let me actually think about that now. And so what they did was it forced them to think about it in that moment. And as they thought about it, it was awesome because they were able to think through, well, this is what they need to be understanding from this. And one of the things that they wanted to help them understand was that there is a connection between physical activity and mental health or positive mental health, development of your mental health. And so ultimately, we want to look at, is the participant understanding that? Are they actually getting that? Because if they're not understanding the point of that activity, well, then you may not be doing something well to meet that goal. And so ultimately that may play a part in the satisfaction rate. But at the same time, they may be satisfied, but they may just not understand the point of it. But your point of that activity is for them to understand what they're getting out of it. And so taking that understanding rate was a huge thing. And that is one of the things I recently started to do. And it was awesome as we did it, because now we're going to start implementing it and putting that survey out within the next week, actually. And we're going to see the response from the participants and get a really good gauge of where the program is starting. So those are those three different things that I look at when I talk about program effectiveness: attendance rate, satisfaction rate, and understanding rate. Now, I think a great place to start when it comes to this is looking at one program. So within your organization, just select one program that's happening. Within that program, select one activity or one event. There's a difference between an event, an activity, and a program. So there's a difference between an event and a program. A program is that overarching thing that encompasses the event within that program. And so the program, for example, that we're working on is that recovery house, and the event within that program is the financial literacy course. And so we want to just make that distinction because it is super important in terms of looking at program effectiveness, because you're really looking at the culmination of all these events. So you want to look at one event, one activity. So say, for instance, I'll use the financial literacy course. That was one event or activity that we specifically looked at and singled out. And then after that, what you want to do is ask really all the people in your organization, and maybe not all the people in your organization, but maybe just the people that are really just focused in this program. But look at how many people, or how many participants are in the overall program. So that's just a mere observation, looking at how many participants are in that overall program. Not that activity, just how many participants are in your overall program. And then after that, you want to look at what percentage of the participants are actually attending that activity. What percentage of those participants that are in your overall program are attending that activity? So for the organization I'm assisting, just because you're in the program doesn't mean that you have to attend this activity. And so with that being said, you want to look at how many people are actually attending that activity that are in the program. And you want to look at that percentage. So say that there was 100 people in your program, for instance, and say that 50 people were actually attending that event in your program. Well, your percentage of participation or attendance is 50%. And so you have 50% attendance, and that's where you're starting out. The reason why I like looking at attendance is because that really shows how well your program is going. It shows how well someone sees your program. Do they see it as something that's worth coming back to? Do they see it as something that's worth going to just in general? And that's why I look at attendance rate specifically in that. But that's what that percentage gets you. Because once you're able to figure out how many of your participants in that program are actually coming to that activity, well, that's where you're starting. That's your observed. That becomes your observed statistic, or observed attendance rate. And so again, for that example, you have a 50% attendance rate starting out. And your goal is to keep growing. You start out with 50%. Awesome. That's where you're starting out. Now, your goal is to keep growing. But I'm not going to tell you what your goal is. And so even though I think that that's the goal, right? But I think a great question to ask really all of the people that are specifically working in that activity or in that program is what percentage of participants what percentage of participants would you like or would you want to attend that activity? And that just focuses on the ideal. What percentage do you want to actually be there at that activity? Now, usually in my mind, I'm like, of course you want 100% of participants there. But sometimes that's not the goal of some nonprofits. Sometimes they're just like, yeah, we really just don't need 100% of our participants there. This is not really that necessary. I think we would like to actually have 90% or 80%. And so it really is, it behooves really all of you guys to really look at the number of participants that you want there. But that's the ideal. Now let's go to realistic. I always do both sides of the coin. So ideal and then realistic. I think the realistic question is, what percentage of participants do you realistically think can attend the activity? What percent of participants do you think can realistically attend that activity? And that becomes your expected. So you started out with your observed, that observed was 50% with that example. And now what percentage do you expect to actually be there? And so maybe your expected attendance rate is 75%. And so what that does is, looking at your observed and your expected, you want your observed attendance to equal your expected attendance. So you want that 50% observed attendance to over time equal 75%, because that's the goal you're shooting for. And what that shows is your growth. That shows how you as a program are doing something right so much so that you're getting the percentage of attendance that you were actually shooting for, which shows a donor that you are progressing within your program as you started with 50% and you're moving to 75%. And maybe after you hit that 75% expected, then your expected increases and it goes up to, say, 90% now, and you're shooting for 90%. But again, that attendance rate is broken down into multiple components. And so what you can do is, with looking at the attendance rating, you can say, I'm starting out with 25% are females. I want to shoot for my expected of 50% being females. Or maybe your population is mainly minority. And so maybe you're saying that right now we have a 30% participation rate of minorities. I want to shoot for 50%. And so what that does is it helps you show and reflect your growth of attendance, but also your growth of meeting the needs of these different backgrounds, or these different backgrounds of these people that are in your community. And so what that does for the donor, there are different donors out there. Some donors give mainly to minorities. Some donors mainly give to specifically female organizations or male organizations, or male dominant, female dominant organizations. And so what that does is you can cater to those different organizations or different donors because they're seeing that specific statistic. But what you're recording is a statistic for really everyone. You're meeting all these different needs. And what you're going to show to that donor is a statistic that really caters to what they want to see. And so if it was a donor that mainly gives to female organizations, I'm going to show you that our female rating has been increasing over time. I'm not going to show you anything else because that's the only thing that you really need to see, because that's the only thing you want to see. Going back to the other side of the coin, minorities as well. If there's a donor that gives mainly to minority organizations, I'm going to just show you that our minority rate is increasing over time in our attendance. I don't need to show you anything else because that's what you want to see. And so this attendance rate can really go into multiple directions, but that's what I love about it, because we cannot discredit how effective and how important this attendance rating really is, because it does really reflect a high rate of program effectiveness. And again, those are those things that you're moving that one rock at a time, one rock from to the left to the right, as you record the attendance rating every time you have this event, and the satisfaction rating and the understanding rating. And you look at that and you're picking up these rocks and moving them to the right, so much so until you're able to see this half a mountain that's over here. And then you're able to see this full mountain. And so, but that's why I really focus first on program effectiveness. Program effectiveness looks at the monthly things. When I look at program effectiveness, I really look at monthly. And it's cool because what happens in that month is you have bi-weekly meetings where you're able to make changes over time. But what that it does is it really helps you to look at and develop a culture of learning throughout your time of you doing that program and doing that activity, rather than waiting until the end of that program or end of that activity to figure that out, which is sometimes just something that is hard, especially when right now, one of the things I'm doing is creating different surveys for the campground that I work for, and creating the survey for an entrance survey, but an exit survey, because it's only 1 week of camp. But one of the things that we're figuring out is how can we look at over time after they leave camp? What can we sort of do to sort of check in and see their progress over time there? But where it starts is in that sort of camp, in that week, I can look at the attendance rating of each activity within that full week of camp. And so we think that these students aren't going to get a lot out of that week of camp, when in fact I can evaluate a lot in that 1 week, because there are so many events and activities that happen in that week. And so me thinking, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? I don't think that anybody would give to something like this. Well, no, let me look at how well our program is going, and looking at this attendance rating and looking at the satisfaction rating, looking at the understanding rating. And as I do that in each activity, because the activities are probably like 30 within a week. And so as I look at each activity and I'm able to measure that, well, then by the end of it, we get so many more statistics than what we expected in the beginning. And so that's what I really love about that. That's what I really love about program effectiveness, is that it very much so is able to look at sort of daily and weekly and monthly factors. Daily, weekly, and monthly factors. If you guys get anything out of this, I want you to remember that. This daily, weekly, and monthly factors and indicators. More specifically, daily and weekly and monthly indicators. Those are so important because they really help you see the trajectory of your organization, of your programs. And so what happens is you look at this one activity and you look at the attendance rating, you look at, and that's what we went through that example, you look at the understanding rating, you look at the satisfaction rating of that one activity. And then you do it for the other activities. And what that does is, as you put those activities and that evaluation of those activities together, it helps you get a more accurate picture of how your overall program is going. Because your program is a culmination of those activities. And that's what I meant by in the beginning. That as you look at and evaluate the culmination of those activities, you're able to get a more accurate and objective picture of how your program is going. Not based off what you feel, not based off what you think, but no, based off of another picture, another story that's being painted, and that story is being painted through numbers. And that those numbers are created not only by asking your staff members, but asking your participants, asking interns if you have interns, and if you're inviting the donor out, asking the donor out. We've done that as well at the campground where we invite the donor out and they've been able to participate in the activity, and we've been able to give them a survey and say, hey, what did you think of this? What were we supposed to get out of this? What do you understand from this? How satisfied were you from this? And by doing that, we were able to not only get the perception of the donor, but the perception of the participants and the perception of the staff members, put it all together and get a holistic story of what was going on. A holistic story of what is going on. And I think that's where I'll end, is program effectiveness helps you to get a holistic story of how well your program is going in the moment, immediately, within that period of time, by looking at activities. And so that is one of the first steps in this. The next step, which again is that half amount, or you could say quarter amount, half amount, whichever image that pleases you the most, but looking at the qualitative impact indicators. And that's what we're going to talk about next, qualitative impact. Program effectiveness simply looks at how well your program is going. It just simply looks at all things that focus and are really centered around the program. Impacts looks at the individual and the friends or any associates of the individual. So program looks at the program, impact looks at the individual. I think that's pretty cool. Just think about that. Impact, I, impact, individual, program, right? And so this is a cool way just to remember that. But the next time we're going to talk about qualitative impacts. And qualitative impact just looks at the perception of an individual's growth. The perception of an individual's growth. And that is extremely important. But that's not something that is a program effectiveness type of indicator. That's not something that you're going to see right out the gate. And that's why it's the next step, because you're going to see that a little bit after you look at these program effectiveness indicators. And so you may be able to see the qualitative impact indicators within 2 months. Within the program we're measuring now, you'll probably see it every 2 months or every 3 months or something like that. But the one that we focused on today was those monthly ones. And that is the conclusion of this time or this week. And if you guys have any questions, I am open to them now.
I always try to give other people a chance. So when you're talking about the surveys for, like you said, donors, staff, so would it be the same survey, or you create different ones that are targeted for those individuals?
Yeah, so usually I will incorporate it into the same survey. And the reason I do that is because within that survey, there are different, how can I say this? Queries, different, what's the way to formulas that you can use to where you can select, say I put on a survey, please indicate if you are a staff member, a volunteer, or a participant. If you select staff member, you'll get different questions than everyone else. If you select participant, you'll get different questions than everyone else.
So you're talking about an electronic survey.
Yes. Yeah. I usually do the electronic survey.
Okay.
Just because you can all incorporate really into like one survey. And it's really just like, it's one link. But at the same time, sometimes that isn't always the best. Now, the electronic ones I use, you don't have to have internet service, which is the beautiful part about it. So if you have no internet, if you haven't already created, what it'll do is you'll be able to fill out that survey. It'll be saved into the database, but it won't be like logged in where you're able to see it until you get internet. But that data that you recorded is still there. And so I love that because that actually is something that was really hard for when you think about developing countries. And that was one of their issues that they had, was that there was no internet. And some of the times where we are right now, a lot of the students sometimes don't have a lot of internet, so they can't do it. But we've been able to figure out a way around it where rather than bringing them paper copies, we're going to say, hey, you can still fill this out, especially when it comes to recovery houses. But you can still fill this out. Don't worry about the internet. Fill it out and it'll be saved. And then we don't have to worry about it because ultimately when they get internet or I get internet, then it'll automatically be uploaded. And so that is my way of doing it now.
Yeah. So because I'm thinking of our camp, and our internet service is awful there. So we try not to do anything, that will require Wi-Fi or anything like that. And so our surveys have always been paper. So it never occurred to me to do anything electronic, just so we could get the feedback immediately.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so what survey, what platform do you use for your surveys?
So I use something called Jotform.
Oh yeah.
Jotform. And so that's been really helpful. I have a paid account. So when I assist nonprofits, I just use my account to help them so to get through what it looks like and how to create this stuff. And then what I do is I recommend that organization buy their own account because it saves everything through Google Drive. So if you have a Gmail account, it's already integrated there. It automatically uploads, and all you have to do is just create a chart from there, but it's organized in the Google Drive. And so it's just a super just easy process and streamlined process more so. So that's what I use personally. And so that's been the number one thing. I've tried other things, different applications that really just focus on like workforce, but they don't upload to a database. Like they don't upload to a drive or like automatically to like Google Forms or something like that. And so for me, it's hard because I need it to be uploaded to like an Excel document or a Google Sheets, sorry, not Google Forms, Google Sheets. I need to be uploaded to Google Sheets, something like that. So I can create a graphic.
SurveyMonkey would not, that they don't do that? Or
I don't believe SurveyMonkey does that.
Okay.
I would have to look into that, but from what my wife has told me, that SurveyMonkey doesn't automatically upload to another database like Google Sheets.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. No problem. We did used to use paper copies just to explain to the experience with it. We did used to use paper surveys for our campground. But through really there's not a lot of negotiation. It was really pretty easy, but it was hard because when it came to recording the data after, someone has to sit down to actually put that data into an Excel sheet or a Google sheet.
Mine is still in the envelope.
Yep.
From the past 4 years, I have envelopes with each year in the surveys, and it's like, okay.
Yep, that was the problem, and no one had time to really do it until I took the time to actually do it because it was my job. but I was like, oh my gosh, this is not going to work anymore. And so thus we created electronic forms. So I totally get it. No, great question. Does anybody else have anything? Awesome. So what I will do is I will again just send this out, send the video out right after, or this recording right after we get off this call. And just please let me know if you guys have any just other questions. Just please just email me through my email, hblllc.info@gmail.com. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Great. Thanks, Jameson.
No problem. Bye, guys.